Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Investor Financing Podcast. We have a great show today. We're going to talk all about sales. I've been in sales my whole life. I sell a beautiful thing, which is money, so most people need it. So it's a little bit easier than selling copying machines. But at the same time, there's always competition. You could pick up your iPhone, like what we were just talking about, Joe, before we went live. You could pick up your iPhone and, there's a million people that do commercial lending like I do, right? And so what's going to separate me? How can I put a different value proposition on what I do? How can I provide more value? And that's what we're going to kind of dive into today is really like what's going to make you a better salesperson? And I don't care what you do. You could be a real estate agent. You could be a wholesaler. You could be a flipper. At the end of the day, everything's about sales. Sales and marketing is the key, I think, for most, every 99% of the people out there that don't have like the typical W-2 job. We're all in some kind of sales capacity. So it's going to be fascinating to talk about it today. And I know it's a skill that you can develop. I mean, some people have an innate ability to sell naturally versus somebody else, but I do think that all these skills are learnable to a certain degree, and it takes practice like anything. So it's going to be interesting to kind of learn from an industry vet who's been in the sales arena for 30 plus years. Please welcome Joe Beck to the show. He's the founder and chief sales officer for The Sales Activist. He's also a podcast host, the Impact Sales Podcast. Joe, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Beau. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. So let's just kind of unpack, the sales process. And we can use me as an example today because I don't mind being an example because I'll learn a few things. I would say that I'm fairly good at building rapport with people. I'm a likable guy, I would hope to say. My strengths are really marketing. Like I have this podcast, right? So thousands of people are going to watch this or listen to this in the future. And that's really good. It's a good sales tool for me. Where I think I lack is the sales process and also the kind of the follow up too of the sales process, right? Like I think that's a piece of the sales process. There's so many pieces that I'm probably missing in my business. So like, where can we start? Where can we provide value to people that are going to watch us and kind of unpack like some things that I could be implementing that might take me to the next level?
Sure, and that's a great opener. So the easiest place to start is to come to the realization that in today's world, especially, very few sales professionals, and it doesn't matter what it is that you sell, are memorable in the eyes of their prospects and their clients. And when you think about that, it makes you realize that if you want to have an advantage, if you want to stand out and be memorable, you're going to have to do some things differently. In fact, studies have shown that less than 20% of sales professionals are memorable in the eyes of their clients. And if you focus on trying to become that 20%, that somebody that is memorable, you're going to have an advantage. But the big issue and the big question is, how do you do that, right? So I think one of the things that's important for people to understand with sales is first thing you have to do is you just have to forget anything that you're about and what you're doing and what you're selling. It's all about your prospect. It's all about the client, what they get, what value they receive, and most importantly, what impact you can have on their life. And being a relationship salesperson is really the ultimate goal. And eventually, and I know you do this very well, is you want to get to that place in the eyes of your prospect that you are perceived as a trusted advisor, somebody who, when they have a question in your area of expertise, they come to you, even if it's not to do business. It's just I want to run this by you because I know you're the guy. You understand these things. So that's the starting point. You have to look at it and understand that you have to stand out. You want to position yourself as an expert, and you want to become a trusted advisor in the eyes of your prospects.
Yeah, I love that. And so kind of unpacking that a little bit more. So I think I do, people watch my videos. They go, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. But at the end of the day, it's still, what's your rate? What's your term, right? It's always going to be, how do we get around that conversation Because at the end of the day, I know I'm not always going to be the cheapest. I'm not always, but I have 24 years of experience. I'm not only I lend money to real estate investors and business owners, and I'm both a real estate investor and business owner. I understand the game. I provide a lot of value. So how should I position myself, like, to make it not so much about the rate and term, but really like the other components of, like, you're getting me, like, and what that means for you, because it's always what's in it for them, not me, is that I'm always going to be fair, transparent. I'm gonna tell you if I don't think it's a good deal, you shouldn't probably buy it, or at least look into it more. How do we start changing the conversation around a little bit, and positioning so we can take them away? Because that initial, it's always that, well, what's the rate? What's the term? Well, I don't even know what your deal is yet, and what kind of property or what. How do we really kind of change the messaging?
Sure. And that's a great question, because I think sometimes there's a lot of people out there that don't change the messaging, and they never even think about it. And when you're dealing with rate issues or pricing issues, you have to understand that in certain industries, yes, that's much more prevalent and much more of an issue than in others. But at the end of the day, it's less of a factor when you build in other reasons why they want to work with you. And I'll give you an example. With somebody with your experience, especially with somebody that's been and seen every possible scenario that's out there, you want to explore as much as you can in the area of impact with a client, meaning you don't want it to just be about rate and term. You don't want it to just be about this transaction. You want to dig into their overall goals and objectives for their business or for their investing as a real estate investor. You want to understand that picture better than anybody else. You want to be the person that asks questions that other people don't ask. And the reason for that is because when you start positioning things in a way that takes the focus away from rate and term or price, whatever you're selling, you now become that trusted advisor. You ask things that other people won't ask. Is this your first, for example, is this your first investment property? What are your goals for your investing business? Are you looking to replace a full-time income eventually as an investor? Taking it to the next level, asking about their journey, their goals, their objectives, makes it an emotional process. It makes it about them. It makes it real. It becomes emotional for them. It's part of their journey that you're learning about and technically sharing with them. Now, the reason why that's powerful is when you stack that up against the rate and term guy, the guy that quotes them a rate and a term, doesn't ask anything else about them, doesn't want to get to know them, their investing business any further, doesn't expand on understanding their business, you will always have an advantage because of the old adage, people buy on emotion. They may move forward based upon logical reasons. They may drill down on a number or an issue or a critical element, but they buy on emotion. They say to themselves, I love Beau. He's asked me things nobody else asked me. He dug into my business. He's an industry vet, but this guy is giving me the benefit of all of his experiences and the work that we do together. And it's simply a matter of conversation. It's simply a matter of going further, exploring impact, what it means to somebody, and really showing them that you care about what is going to happen with them. I think that's the key.
Yeah, I like that a lot, because I always find myself, even when a potential prospect calls and I know there's no deal, sometimes I find myself spending 50 minutes on a call where I don't need to do that. I'm doing that because, I enjoy sharing information. I've collected lots of information. I've interviewed very smart people on real estate investing and business ownership. So I think I have a level of knowledge. So really what I'm hearing you say is it's positioning and asking the right questions. And also, I think it's kind of like indirectly positioning yourself, because they need to understand, like, I'm talking you're talking with somebody with experience. I'm not here to just sell you something. I'm trying to give you good guidance, and I'm not, and I might not always be the cheapest cost of funds, but I'll always be competitive, and you're always going to get top line advice. And I think that is really kind of the starting point, right? So, I mean, I don't typically I wouldn't say I'm a sales professional because I don't think about the sales process like I probably should, because really it's kind of a dance on finessing this a little bit. So like, what are some tips that that somebody in sales could start breaking down today? You know, like, we'll just use me as an example again. Like, when a prospect watches another video and books a call with me, they obviously want some sort of advice or a quote, a rate quote. Where how would you start the conversation? I mean, is it really kind of getting around the rate and kind of learning their objectives first, right? That's what, like, I should dive in the case. Oh, like, where are you investing now? You know, build the rapport. Where would the framework look like on building a more successful sales process?
Sure. And that's a great question. I think you started it correct with rapport. I think you do have to build a little bit of rapport, maybe find some commonality, get to know them on a personal level a little bit before you start getting into the business elements at all. But you really have to do a thorough discovery call with somebody. And it doesn't matter what they're interested in, what their product or service desires may be. First, you have to understand the situation so you can truly make a good recommendation when it comes to that point. But 7 out of every 10 sales professional will fall down right in the discovery process. They'll miss critical elements that they needed to understand about that prospect before they ever got to the point of making a proposal or offering a product or a solution. So I think you build rapport, and I think everybody's got their own way of doing it. Just like when we started talking about some common elements, where we were from, different things that, that's very, very normal in how you will start a conversation. But then you need to start getting into the discovery elements. What are you trying to accomplish? Yes, I want to understand this transaction, but what's the greater picture? And the reason is, there's an appropriateness test to anything you offer somebody nowadays, right? Like, you offering the wrong product, the wrong solution based upon their situation isn't going to help you, and it isn't going to help them. So discovery is an important element. If you become a master of discovery, asking the right questions, exploring them, uncovering the impact, if you do that really, really well, the sales part of it becomes easy. People start to like you and trust you. The rapport is built. You've asked very pertinent questions. You ask them things probably nobody else has asked. They sense that you really want to help them. The solution you show them is less relevant than you would imagine. Unfortunately, it's just the way we're wired as human beings. If you show somebody that you care and you try to do right by them and you're fair, price doesn't become the end all. I know some people would argue with me on that, but I've just seen it time and time again where people have a more expensive product or solution, but people work with them because they just know they're getting better from them. And that makes all the difference in the world. But it starts with discovery. If you do a great job in discovery, the rest becomes easy.
And there's also like inbound. So I've kind of been fortunate that I've been have a good media or marketing piece where people are inbounding me, which makes the sales process a little bit easier if somebody's calling me versus me calling them.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. There's an interest. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's always a good thing for a salesperson. If you can position yourself, build authority where people are reaching out to you, that makes the sales process easier. Now, what do you get involved in the sales process from the prospecting side as well? Or are you, because that's a big piece of it too, right? There's the inbound. I'm getting a lot of inbound calls, which is great, but I also know that I really suck at the outbound prospecting part because I've been a little bit lazy, right? Because I get X amount of calls per day for people that see something or listen to my podcast or get referred to me, which is great. That's what you want. You want referrals. I know that. But I also think I have another component of my business, which is different than the lending side, and that I don't have the same authority in that space, right? So I don't get the inbound calls. That's all outbound prospecting, which is like completely different for me, and it's a lot harder. So do you work with your clients on developing like sales prospecting approaches, or what's the framework there?
Yeah, and that's a great point. Nowadays, the sales professional, it doesn't matter what you're selling, needs to be a little bit of an expert in multiple disciplines, right? I'm very fortunate across my working career that I was never in a sales position or role where somebody handed me a pile of leads and said, here you go after it. And most of them I was forced to prospect. I was forced to figure out ways of finding, my client. So I think, yes, you need to be able to do both. And yes, I do help people with both of those areas. I've partnered with some very proficient experts in the area of marketing. And then I kind of bridge the gap between whatever vehicle you use to market and how you build the language, how you build the word tracks to make that productive. That's part of it. You have to fill your calendar before you can create a lot of sales. So we certainly do that. And we spend quite a bit of time and work with people quite a bit on how they convert, what their ratios, their metrics look like. And, I think too many times people get caught up in the close, right? What's your close rate? And I think that close rate is less important versus some of the other metrics. Because if you do everything else right, the closing happens naturally. People make decisions for themselves all the time. They decide, you know what, here we are. We've gone through all this. This has been a great experience. Yeah, I may pay a little bit more, or it may not be exactly what I want, but I feel good about you, and this is one message I want to make sure that your listeners hear. It's you yourself are the X factor in every interaction, in every communication, every sale opportunity. You're the X factor, your personality, your individualism, the way you come across and relate to people. You become the X factor. You become the thing that can overshadow pricing, overshadow an inferior product. I mean, how many products do you know out there that are more expensive, less detailed, but do great in sales? It's because somewhere along the way, somebody was that X factor, or some campaign was that X factor. So you have to be good at both nowadays. You have to be able to prospect, and you have to be able to kind of respond. Like I look at sales, both prospecting and the art of selling, kind of like a NASCAR pit stop. Like you're going around lap after lap and you make a pit stop. Well, in a pit stop, they make 15 little minor adjustments to the car, and you never know which one's going to make the biggest difference. But you got to make them. You got to make the adjustments. And that's where an expert, somebody in my field, comes in to help make the adjustments.
And being in sales my whole life, it's like this, right? It's that whole roller coaster. We got, I got a $9 million deal. Yes, I'm going to make a ton of money in the back of my mind. But I know we got the initial, we got the approval, but the borrower still got to sign. He still wants to go forward. It's like now they go quiet. They're like, we're going to just pay cash. We don't need to get a loan. And it's highs and lows. I think a lot of salespeople out there, it's like every day is different, and it's hard to keep positive when you're like, yes, I got, all of a sudden one day you're like, man, I got $20 million of new loans in my pipeline. This is a great day. And then all of a sudden all of the loans fall out, and you're like, whoa, this is not great right now. And all the headaches that come along with the closing process, the paperwork, all this stuff. Right. So, I mean, a lot of it is mental and keeping positive. I mean, that's the big thing too, is this right here. It's what you tell yourself. And I think that's something a lot of salespeople struggle with the most. It's like, because if you just came in and did effective work, whether that's 20 prospecting calls a day or 50 prospecting calls or emails or however you're marketing, the problem is, I think a lot of salespeople set off with all these goals. They write their to-dos down. Okay, every day, Monday through Friday, I'm going to make 20 outbound calls. I've done that so many times. I make 0 calls, and it pisses me off. But it's like, so there's so much dynamic components behind being a good salesperson. Like, you have to be super consistent. You have to be able, you have to be able to. And then a lot of people get busy, and then they stop prospecting, or they stop that outbound sales process. So, how do you work with your clients on that kind of stuff?
Sure. Well, and you're right in that discipline is a big part of it. And, one of the very first bits of advice I got from a mentor when I was younger was, he told me, look, Joe, don't celebrate or commiserate past the moment. Like, you could have the biggest deal ever hit your pipeline. Great, get excited about it for the moment, and then get back to business. Or you could lose the biggest deal you ever thought you were going to have. don't let that eat you up to the point that you fall apart. So being consistent, not letting those big swings, whether they're good or bad, impact you is hard. It's an emotional journey. It takes a certain amount of discipline to work through it. I think the one thing that I've taught people over the years, and I've had the great fortune, both in the corporate world and in the entrepreneur space, to have worked with over 3,500 entrepreneurs in different fields. And the thing that I've noticed is, being able to overcome those emotional challenges and focus on high value activities versus low value activities is what separates the elite from the average. Like, every day you kind of know what the critical elements of your day are, but throughout the day you're distracted, things come at you. So the really elite know to focus on the high value activities. Like, I've got to get my prospecting in. I've got to make this number of calls or have this many appointments, and anything else becomes secondary to that. Now, once those things are done, then I get to the list of other things. But in the world we live in today, there's just a ton of distractions. Your emails are going off, your messages are going off, texts, it's easy to get distracted. So the hardest thing that you can do is put yourself in a position where you feel that pressure, you're distracted, you're not where you want to be. It seems like you're so far away. And the fact is, for the average person, you're not. You strip away all the non-essential stuff. You get down to the high value activities. You start making calls, interacting with people, and solving problems. That was another bit of advice. Make calls, see people, solve problems. Sales comes down to just that. Doesn't matter what you sell, doesn't matter what you offer. If you interact with people, see a need, solve the problem, you're going to be successful. So it's an emotional journey. A lot of the people that I work with, it's part sales expertise and it's part psychology. It's getting into people's heads and explaining to them, look, you're holding yourself back because of this or this concern or this. You got to work beyond that. Now, part of that, and this, especially in your line of work, it's a numbers game too. There's the science, which are the numbers, and then there's the art, which is the skill component piece. You have to have a good balance between the both. They have to kind of work in sync with each other.
You're listening to the Investor Financing Podcast. We'll be right back after this break.
Hi, this is Beau, host of the Investor Financing Podcast. I appreciate you checking out our channel. On this podcast, we talk about real estate, investing, financing, business lending, and acquiring and expanding your business. I'm sure you will find some videos here that will help you build your business empire. There's a lot to see. Take your time and make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks again. So yeah, I think being disciplined and being able to time block would be essential. Like, where you're putting in, from 9 a.m. to 11, I am turning off everything and all I'm doing is outbound calls. But the problem is like, unless you put that in your calendar and you turn your notifications off, and then you even put like a timer on, sometimes where you could be at 100% focused, because that's really where I feel that most people fail, is like they set out to do it, but they never can just do it, which seems so easy, but it's so difficult.
It is. Well, and there's other things too that we all know these things, but it's the actual implementation that's the challenge. And I'll give you an example. I tell people all the time, whether you knew it or not, you're paid in two ways. And, it's in receipt of the product or service that you offer, whether it's in commission form or a fee form, whatever it is, that's one way. And the second way, and we all know this, you're paid through referrals. But even though we know this, it's ingrained in our heads, we forget to mention it. We forget to tell people I'm also compensated in the form of referrals. And that becomes critical when you're dealing with somebody who you think looks like a great deal, but it falls apart. Well, see, if you told them at the beginning, I'm paid in two ways. I'm paid in the products we work with together, or in a referral. It becomes really easy to pivot and say, I know this deal didn't work out, but let me ask you this. What other business owners do you know that you could introduce me to? Or what other investors do you know that I could get connected to? And even though everybody knows that, I've found that a very small percentage of people do that effectively. They just don't make that immediate switch and the immediate communication that I'm also paid when you give me a referral.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, I just think about everybody's phone that they have, their network in their phone. Imagine just reaching out and having conversations and not just, hey, I'm calling you to see if you have any referrals, but, build rapport, connect with people and do your thing. And just how powerful that would be, just like the existing relationships you already have, which are probably the easiest ways to get deals, period. And nobody's doing it, or not many of us salespeople are doing it. It's like, what are we thinking, right? Like, so it's a surefire way of getting deals. So, what kind of sales professionals have you worked with over the last 30 years? I mean, and what type of sales professionals do you prefer to work with? Industries and things like that.
I've been fortunate, to have worked in multiple different industries. I love working with other coaches and consultants. I primarily focus on higher ticket sales. Not that I can't help anybody, but I like working with people that are selling higher ticket items, something that's, anywhere from a couple $1,000s to multiple six figures. I think it's a different type of process, by way of relationship, which aligns well with the way I sell myself as well as the way I teach people. So anybody in the coaching, professional services field, consultants, things like that, I do a lot of great work with. I've done it for many years. My background is very varied. It started in transportation with large companies like UPS. I spent a number of years in financial services, so I get the mind of a financial advisor. Spent quite a few years in telecom, working in a competitive marketplace with, a lot of different options. And now I do just a lot of work in the entrepreneur space, anywhere from solopreneur up to a $10-15 million a year company who maybe has an owner who's a subject matter expert in something, maybe they're an inventor or something, but they just don't know how to sell. That's just not their thing, right? I do a lot of work in that area as well.
Yeah, that's exciting and it's fun. It sounds like a fun industry to be in, just because you get to help a lot of diverse business owners and really it's kind of like black and white, right? Like it's okay. Let's look at your sales process now, and then you help them create a better sales process through prospecting and just the sales process in general, and then they can easily measure the success, right? Well, what are we doing now? What are we doing different? And then you're also acting as accountability where you're checking in with them. And, okay, like, well, how many sales calls did you make this week? Okay, and what have been the results, right? If somebody just held you accountable, that's like half the battle, I think, personally, right? Like
it is. Well, it's one of the things, like when I work with somebody now, I can make assurances. Over the years, I've developed my own proprietary sales system and how I approach things, both from an activity standpoint, follow-up standpoint, and everything. And I can show a business owner that, if you give me 6 to 12 months on my system, I'm pretty much assuring you that I'll triple your sales revenues. Like I just know the results will be there. The hard part, as you know, is the discipline, getting somebody to do it. And accountability is one piece, but then self-accountability and self-correction is the ultimate goal, getting them to the point that they don't need somebody looking over their shoulder, but that they make the corrections themselves. They do them quickly. They recognize, oh, did this the wrong way, should have done this, or I missed the opportunity. I need to make an adjustment. Getting people to the point that they think about it themselves and become self-sufficient on it is the ultimate goal. Making them at that point being able to take ownership completely of their own sales process.
That's awesome. Well, this has been an awesome show. Joe, where's the best place for people who might want to look into your services and also maybe listen to your podcast? Where should people go?
Absolutely. The easiest place is to go to my digital business card. You can just text the word sales to the number 321-421-5213. Or you can check out my website at www.thesalesactivist.com.
Well, thank you so much. I hope everybody out there got a lot of good nuggets here. I mean, when it comes down to it, people, we have to think more about our sales process. It's like I'm kind of a foolish for, not thinking about a sales process more because it's like the biggest piece that can literally double, triple, quadruple your earnings. I mean, so more people need to think about this. This is the biggest piece of your business right here. It's the sales and prospecting part of it. Everything else is secondary. Without sales, you're not going to be in business. So, Joe, thank you so much for your time. It was extremely valuable. I hope everybody out there, whatever business you're in, you could take the nuggets that we talked about today, implement them into your business, and have a lot more success. I know I'm going to take a bunch of these nuggets and dial for dollars.
That's right. Well, it's been a pleasure being on the show, Beau. I appreciate it very much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode.